Howdy, howdy. Off-grid North Country. So I had something I want to talk about. Again, a little more on the correlation between volcanic eruptions and cold weather. And I'm going to go back a little bit in history to 1257 was the eruption of Mount Salma's volcano. It was very cold according to history. Now, previous to that, there's a record you can read in Saxo Grammaticus. There was a, and it has actually happened twice, and I don't really know. The one time in not so distant past, maybe we'd say around 900, I'm guessing, and then around the fall of the Roman Empire, there was another period of extreme cold in the north where their crops failed. But the one account talks about how there was 3 seasons in a row that the grain crops failed in Denmark, Norway, and Sweden, and that caused famine, and the people decided to migrate south. Some of them, and they pulled lots to see who would go, and half the people went south, and the other half stayed because there just wasn't enough to support all the people who were there, and that was where we get the Lombard invasion, the second Lombard invasion. The first invasion was most likely caused by a similar thing, cooling in the north and famine because of the lack of food. And if you go back to the what they call the Little Ice Age of starting around 1303, the Baltic Sea froze over. In 1306 and 1307, it also froze over. And in 1315, there was a volcanic eruption. And let's see, 1315. I think I had a note here which one that was. Sorry, guys. 1315 to 1317 was the Great Famine and the Black Death, and that was right after a big volcanic eruption. There's another account in 1658. A Swedish army attacked Copenhagen by marching across the Great Belt of the Sea between Sweden and Copenhagen. And then in 1783, crops failed in Iceland, Greenland, and other parts of the north because of the volcano Loki. In 1794, 1795, it was a really harsh winter. And approximately from 1410 to 1720, Greenland was cut off by ice. So we had a period there of a lot of cold. And that lasted until in the 1700s. Then, now in the last, we have a lot more information on the last big volcanic eruption. Was Mount Tambora in 1815. And it caused the year without a summer of 1815, 1816. The ocean currents changed, wind speed changed and direction. Some areas had drought, some areas had heavy rain. The temperature approximately dropped 2.5 degrees that year. It was called the year without a summer, and over 200,000 people died as a result of the famines and the cold, etc. From Mount Tambora's eruption. And in 1980, we had Mount St. Helens, but Mount St. Helens didn't seem to have the effect that Mount Tambora had, or the volcanic eruption of the Salamalas volcano of 1257. That one had a serious effect on the weather of the north. It caused cooling. Right now, there's approximately 20 active volcanoes going on. We had the one, the Hunga Hapai that just went the other day. It only lasted about 10 minutes. But it's estimated it sent off over 4,000 tons of sulfuric dioxide into the stratosphere. Most likely we'll see cooling from that. It seems like a lot of times people underestimate the impact that volcanic eruptions have on the heat, the temperature of the Earth. And in 1815, it was 0.4% between 1815 and 16. The degrees went down over America. And why I want to bring this out is the emissions from the volcano and from the ash and particles it produces cause rain and also the sun to be blocked. And like I think it was a day ago, was it yesterday? There was snow in North Africa. I would suspect that is most likely a direct effect of the Hunga Tonga Hunga Hapai blowing. And right now there's about 27 volcanoes going, about 100 more or less that are partly active. And it's at any given time around 20 volcanoes emitting lava or ash. It seems like this last one we had was probably they said the biggest in the last 30 years. It was one of the few volcanoes that got high enough to actually put ash up into the upper levels of the Earth's atmosphere. I think that if we saw an eruption in, let's say Yellowstone, it would cause some serious cooling, as long as it was big enough to cause the shadow of the ash, or the sun to be blocked by the ash, I'd say. The reason I want to talk about this is a lot of times we hear about Klaus Schwab and the global elite talking about the climate crisis and global warming by man-made emissions. And I've said this before, that in my theory, that emissions are, we would say, they're carbon. And to me, it's quite plain what carbon does. Carbon is plant food. It is, emissions cause the earth to green. I wouldn't say necessarily that emissions cause, if the emissions have acid or other chemicals in them, it could cause damage to vegetation and plants, trees, etc. But overall, the carbon is good for the earth because it feeds the plants. And my theory is that this carbon emissions that they're so concerned about have no comparison to some of these volcanoes that go off. I mean, just this one this last week, estimated at 4 million tons of sulfuric dioxide. That's a lot of sulfuric dioxide. Now, humans, excuse me. Yeah, so humans, by all we do, we emit very little compared to a volcano. I mean, you could take all the human emissions in a year, and they wouldn't add up to a volcanic eruption. And I really think that, although I'm not trying to say I support the industrial model of life. I personally would like to see people going back to the old ways, family-based farm communities, living off the land, trading and bartering with each other, doing a good trade, working with your hands, and getting off this modern age of how would you say it? Everything seems to be focused on to make life easier. And the goods and services that are produced now become less quality and cheaper, and they just don't have the value that used to have. I mean, I can buy a tool at an auction. It's probably a lot older than I am, and they're still better than what you buy today in the store. It's hard to find tools that are made to last. And it's not just tools. I mean, it's everything. The quality is not there. It's of a lesser quality. The pride that used to go into making of tools seems to be missing. It's made to, most things are made as a throwaway. It's a throwaway society, a consumeristic society. Um, it's to it's good for the trade, those that work in trade and commerce, but for those that actually use the products, it's not. Um, but I want to get back to this idea I have about the theory of the Earth heating up or cooling down based on man's emissions. I can say for a fact that if you go back and look at the in World War II, when the war was at its highest, and also World War One. I think it was World War One, 1914, 15. The corn froze in the Midwest, and I don't think that coincided with a volcano, but it may have coincided with all the ash and smoke and fires burning in Europe. Um, Also, I mean, I've noticed here this year there's been quite a change in the wind direction. Normally we have a northwest wind predominantly. Very rarely do we get a southeast wind, but yet this year we've had storm after storm after storm coming out of the southeast, and even today it's blowing out of the east, or mostly out of the east, I'd say today. And it's very unusual because most of the years we were here, our lane would drift shut from the northwesterlies, and this year we've had drifts have been minimal, not near as many. Well, for one, we've had very little northwesterly winds. Yesterday we had a northwesterly that blew a drift over the lane, but most of our storms have been east southeast. And I asked my viewers why. I'm curious to see what happens this year, how the weather's going to be, because since we've lived here, we moved up in 2017. We have usually by June is our planting time, and it's gotten really dry. I mean, really dry. We had almost no rain through June and into July for like the last 3 years. But before we moved up here, they said it was a very wet year. Now I'm curious to see what this year turns out to be. Usually we get our rain July, August, and then into September, and it'd make it hard to harvest because it was a wet in the fall. It got second cutting hay. This year we did better on second cutting hay than the 2 years previous. We had a longer season, it seemed like. But what happens, it starts to rain in the fall, and then the hay doesn't dry out in time to get put away. But the funny thing is about this area is the dryness of June, and I'm curious to see if this wind direction in the winter is going to affect the weather in the summer. We'll see. I mean, I'll have to see what happens. But back to my rant about these globalists that claim that they need to enforce our crisis is going to be global climate change. We know the Bible says that in the last days there'll be wars, rumors of wars, famines and pestilence, earthquakes, and all kinds of natural disasters coming upon the earth more and more as the time approaches. I don't expect to see it get better. Most likely we'll get more. And I think it's best we be prepared for the hard times, whether or not the system crashes or society trade is disrupted, just in general, to be prepared for the hard times of natural or man-made disasters. We could look at it in being the sense of preparedness is a good idea regardless. And a lot of people who today, they'll say, well, they don't produce what they need. They buy everything. They go to the store and they buy. If you go back in time, like the 1800s, the average farm produced what it ate and what it needed to survive. And back further than that, people made their own clothing. They produced most of their own stuff. I feel like as the modern age has, the Industrial Revolution and the modernism, the conveniences that people have, has driven us away from a self-sufficient land-based lifestyle. And that to me is very sad, because I feel like the strength of a country or people lies in its landed farmers and what it produces, not just its war making capabilities, not just in its numbers, but in its moral, strong family land-based people who can produce the things that the country needs to survive. And I feel like in today's times, I think we need to remember we're heading into a time of trouble. And I don't like to sound cynical, but too many people today do not know how to do anything. Or they may know how to do things, but it will not be applicable to survival in an off-grid or grid-down scenario or a disaster type situation. They won't be able to produce And you know, a production of food is a serious engage. You must be engaged with it. It takes time and effort. The preparing the soil, the planting, the weeding, the watering. It takes an effort that um, most people are not used to putting forth. They will more likely say, "Well, I just I'll go to my job and I'll work to earn money to buy what I need," and they don't think of the fact that, for one, the big businesses that control our systems, the food they produce is not healthy. A lot of it's GMO modified, full of additives, preservatives, chemicals, and it's just not what it should be. And I think the local community and families today that want to live the way we should, it's harder to live alone with the community. And I'm looking even the Amish. I see the Amish slowly becoming more and more dependent upon the outside world for cash. And I would like to see a switch towards the people who do not chase the dollar. Everybody talks about having assets, but yet the true value of life is passing on what we know to our children and others. The heritage we've received from our ancestors that's been given to us from hundreds and even 1,000 years back, we pass on as we teach our children. But today, most children are not learning what they should. In my opinion, they're not learning the importance of when you plant, or to reap you must plant. They don't understand that everything takes time and hard work, and also we don't understand the blessing of God. We don't do it alone. I feel like our Creator made the earth for us, and if we do as He said, He'll bless us. He gave us the rain to the righteous and the wicked, but yet those that keep His commandments, it says, will be blessed with a bountiful harvest, and their crops will be protected. And I've always thought of nowadays people use chemicals and sprays, and they don't think of the fact that the blessing of God may be absent. We all got to eat, and I think it's important that we remember that the value that we place on learning, we should focus that learning on what matters, not just what society says we should learn, but we should focus it on what matters for true survival in life, in a life that is in harmony with the earth and how I think it should be. And I really wish I could help other people see the value of the simple lifestyle. I would say the old-fashioned lifestyle, the way of our ancestors. We've been given it. Let's don't lose it. Hey, you guys all take care. I carried on for a while. I'll see y'all later. Bye-bye, Danger.